user group. Thank you for attending. Good turnout. Okay, today's session will be Allison over there. She's a Microsoft MVP. How many years now? Okay, I thought it's like 5-6 years. Okay, good. Thank you. So she came all the way from Auckland, not Wellington. She's going to talk about some really cool stuff in Power BI reporting, which you'll see in a second. About us, how many of you are first timer here? That's cool. Thank you. How did you find us? Meetup? Yeah.
All over the place.
That is cool. Great. Thank you for coming. We are actually running this user group for like 12 years now. Usually a meeting every month, but some months like January, December, nothing. It's a free session that we have like this. And usually it's a VP or a Microsoft person, an expert in the field comes and share their knowledge for about an hour. We have it like a conversational. So you would also have time to connect with other people as well. Organizers of this is me, David, and Indira. Here. If you have any questions about anything here, just feel free to come and see us. And our lovely hosts are Daniel, DSR, and Shimane. Where's Shimane?
Chimes is probably just round the corner.
Saw her when you all walked in.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So Shimane or Chimes, and Dan, you want to talk about security things?
Oh yes. Look, hey, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for being patient with our wonderful security processes. We really appreciate the fact that they can be a bit of a pain, and just wanted to say thank you. And we are working with our global security team to hopefully make these processes easier for the communities to run. And yeah, so what I wanted to say, but also the cards, the little name badges, just drop them in when you leave. Just drop them in that little plastic container by the door. That's all. But yeah, we will continue to improve the process so you don't all have to queue and wait. And
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And Dan and Shimane, they both are like they are not in Microsoft sales team actually. This is not part of their job to help us. They just do it because they just love the community.
Yeah.
So very happy to have you here. Okay, some housekeeping. If it is your first time in this user group, one thing is that to go to the bathroom, you'll need the keys. Show the keys. And we have one hanged over there. So use the key and then put it back in place. That is one thing. Phones on silent. Fire escape will go streaming all the way down. And then Sofitel, I think, is where the assembly point is.
Sofitel across the road by the soap.
Yeah. Upcoming events. Now, apart from our speakers who already know about that, you are actually the first group of people knowing that Dfinity, which we used to run it like previously, the last one was 2022, is happening again this year. We are going to have it 28th of November. It's a one-day event. This year, we are actually going to do that in 3 cities, Auckland, Melbourne, and Sydney. So you have the opportunity to go and attend. Melbourne website is up as of now. We haven't even announced it in LinkedIn or other places. So you are literally the first people knowing that. And that's pretty much it. A special thanks to Microsoft for hosting us, Radacat for food, and and one last thing I want to show you just before Allison show all the magic in Power BI. Not sure if you have seen this. This is a cool thing I just wanted to show you for a second. Yesterday, we had the announcement of the new Power BI desktop, August 2012 version, and it has a really cool feature I want to show you quickly. How many of you using Power BI, by the way? Most of you. When you have a Power BI report, when you have a visual like this, sometimes your visuals have quite a lot of records in this visual. When you have it like this, you don't really always scroll down and down, down, again down, right? This would cause some performance issues on the back end of this semantic model. So one way is to filter it down, but that usually takes a little bit of time. So what they've added actually yesterday, is that you can select the visual, go to the filters on the visual, and then select this little thing, add data limit. When you do that, then you can choose how many rows you want this to have a limit. Let's say I want this always to have 15 rows. Right? This basically filters it so that I always see the 15 rows. Even if I go to the performance and start this recording, visuals, I just want to show you what the query behind the scene looks like. And this is not really used to using touchpad. I'm a mouse person. Okay, here it is. So it is not only a visual thing. You see that this is also in the screen. This is the top 15 that we mentioned over there, right? So really cool thing. It would help you to have a much better performance, even with just adding that little thing. So make sure you add it on your visual, especially matrix visual, table visual, map visual, things like that. This would help.
For a first time load, we do that.
Anytime you click on a filter slicer, anytime that this requires to get the
No, I mean,
data
for
from.
example, if we are filtering and for of the time we have a lots of records, still this one will bring 15 of that one, or no, it will shows all the records.
This is only the 15s that
first-
is like the top 15 that comes in this list, right? If I have a slicer, for example, that top 15 might be different. Like, and add a slicer. My visual. I have a little slicer. Say I have a slicer, for example, for gender. And when I go and select on this means that the top 15 male, for example, top 15 female. So based on all of your selection, things like that. I haven't tested it to see if it is working on direct query or not, but it certainly works on direct lake models as well, which helps in the performance.
Sorting criteria.
Basically, whatever the default sorting is in your visual. If the sorting on the visual is based on, usually sort on visual usually is based on the measure that you are presenting, descending. But if you change it, this would be based on that sort, whatever sorting.
You use Copilot to do the same thing?
Don't think Copilot.
If you can.
But you can go to
Yeah.
DAX and generate that using.
I actually saw a demonstration at lunchtime.
Okay.
And so you can also use Copilot if you actually put it on the top of it, so that you can actually click on Copilot and sort by and pick out, say, the top 20 things. 15 things. It's like what Reza did. So if you don't have Copilot, if you do have Copilot, you can sort it and get it in the context, and you'll have a.
Thank you. Okay. This was just to show you this new up there, and you're fine.
All right. Afternoon, evening. How's everyone doing? Is it warm in here? Do we have control over that?
Conditioning is a little have all the doors open.
Allison, do you want to turn your mic on? Is your mic?
It is on.
I bet. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Yeah. Correct. Directional mic. I like, yeah. Right. So how many of you again use Power BI? How many of you have used it today? Okay. So what we're going to be talking about today is time-saving tips for creating polished reports in Power BI. So one of my least favorite things to do is to make a report look good. And I joke when I introduce myself in the business world that I make numbers look pretty and that that's my job. And here I am telling you that that's kind of my least favorite part of my job. So in Power BI, it has come a long way, and there's a lot of functionality that we can use with Power BI to make that a little bit easier than it used to be. And I am not going to pretend to know all the tips and tricks, so I want this to be interactive and kind of a conversation, and feel free to share some of your frustrations, some of the things that you guys have learned, just like David did with Reza. If you guys know a cool thing that you're doing that I'm kind of talking about, but you think I'm not going to mention, just interrupt me. Likewise, if you have any questions, interrupt me. I'm very relaxed presenter, very casual. I don't want you to wait till the end for questions, so just shout out, raise your hand, let me know. So we're gonna start by having a conversation about what does it mean to make your reports look pretty? Is it important?
Yes.
Why? To identify what you're doing, for who, or say that again? Engage with the stakeholders.
It makes the numbers more accessible to the people using them.
It makes the numbers more accessible to the people using the report. Yeah, like numbers and visuals, if you've got tons of numbers floating around on the page, that's exactly what they do to me, right? They just float around on the page. You get lost in it. I get super excited when I'm working in Power BI and I end up with, how many of you end up with a bunch of page 1, duplicated page 1, page 62, right? Super excited, and I'm learning all of these things about the data and the insights, and I've got 500 exciting things that I want my stakeholders to know. And how much time are they going to give me? Oh, that's generous, right? I reckon it's less than 2 minutes, right? If you haven't captured them in that first 30 seconds, you've lost them, right? And so that's the biggest challenge of my job, is getting my stakeholders buy-in and getting them to love the data insights as much as I do, right? Because they're just like, we know the answer, Allison, just tell us what we already know. All right. So it's really important. We agree that making things engaging and pretty and getting that stakeholder buy-in is important. So let's have that frustration conversation. What are some of the most time-consuming things that you guys do to make that happen? Conditional formatting. All right. How many of you use DAX for conditional formatting? How many of you do conditional formatting without any DAX? You guys can teach me a lot. I always use DAX for my conditional formatting. The built-in interface drives me a little bit crazy, but you can do either way. What frustrates us about conditional formatting?
Tell me the traffic light system on the report. Like,
Yep.
takes time to do that. It's easy for him to tell me.
Yeah, so you need to have the data quality before you can actually apply the conditional formatting on it. The stakeholder says, I want a traffic light, right? It's easy to just paint a traffic light or do that, in an Excel file, but in Power BI, it takes a little bit more time and finesse, right? How many of you know that, how many of you are using DAX for conditional formatting? How many of you know what the icon names for like the traffic light reporting are in DAX? Oh, okay. How many people use the UniChar? A couple. All right. So let's have a look at conditional formatting. And what do I want to do? I might do a new report. And I'm going to hopefully connect this one to our good old AdventureWorks. All right, so what I just did there is how I create reports almost every single time. How many of you use that same method? Ah, yeah, that's what I thought. So when I'm doing Power BI reports, I have learned that it's a pain when I'm in the development stage of my data set, but I thank myself for it later if I keep my report separate from my data set. And so when I've got a data set, I publish that data set as the data set, and then I build the reports separate to that data set on top of the data set. The reason that I like that better is because now I've got the ability to create a nice new fresh report without my 60 duplicate pages. I've got my data set there. If I need to publish that new traffic light change, it's a nice, quick, easy publish. I don't have to wait for the whole data model to reload or refresh. I don't have to forget to refresh the data model before I publish back up my changes to the report, right? So I'm not messing with the underlying data when I'm doing that report layer of making things pretty. All right. I'm really lucky that the company I work for has lots of data models that are certified that I can use and tap into. And so that makes that even easier. So that means that if I build a data model that is valuable, somebody else in the company can go and use that. And we don't have to keep reinventing it. So not quite a polished report tip, but still really helpful thing to consider. All right, so what we're going to do is look at conditional formatting. So we're going to do sales amount. Let's do a couple of things. Let's try by color. And let's do it by the fiscal year. This is a terrible data model. All right. So we want that traffic light reporting, right? How many of you are struggling to see that? How can I make it bigger? There's at least two answers I can think of. Control, scroll. This is super exciting. There didn't actually used to be a zoom on the page in Power BI. I don't remember when it came in, but it's very cool that you can zoom to whatever level you want. I can make that bigger. So that's just zooming in. It's not changing the font size of the actual page itself. If I want to change the font size for the entire report and make it a little bit bigger, how do I do that? Windows key plus settings. I want it to be nice and big for when I publish because this is a report that doesn't need a lot of information. People are going to be viewing it on a tiny screen.
Change the page size.
Change the base size. I could change the canvas size, right? How many of you use themes? So we're going to talk quite a bit about themes today. So in the View tab, in Power BI Desktop, we've got this styles kind of area here. And you'll notice that there's lots of different color options that you can choose. That's cool. But what's really helpful is that we've got the ability down here to customize our current theme. And so if I customize my theme, I can change my colors, but I can come in here and I can change the default font size. So I could increase that. And that just makes my default font size for the entire report a little bit bigger. And so now I don't have to be quite so zoomed in for you guys to be able to read what's on that visual. And it's fixed it for that visual, but it's also fixed it for that visual as well. Right. Okay, so we want to do some sort of traffic light or icon reporting, conditional formatting. So I'm going to do conditional formatting for icons. What the heck does all of this mean?
The rules.
It's the rules for the colors. Why does it say %, %?
Selected.
It's what?
What's selected?
What do you mean by selected?
You're talking about.
Yeah, it's what, but
Based on the values.
based on the values. So 0 to 33% is red. What does that mean in English?
Taking the biggest number as 100%.
The biggest number is 100%. I heard in the background. Right? So there's a range. So if we look at this visual that we're trying to format over here, we've got our numbers ranging from 27 million to just about 500 million, 900 million if we include the totals. All right? So 0% is going to be that 27 million. What's 33% going to be? Yeah, so it depends, and it's dynamic depending upon your data range, right? So it doesn't go from 0 to highest, it goes from the lowest value to the highest value, and it's about that percentage of the biggest value, yes.
Just so it's not based on the values? Why is it so?
Can you adjust it so that it's not based on the values? So
It could be based on 33% of the numbers, not necessarily the actual highest, lowest value.
yeah, so at the moment, this one's saying if the value is greater than that within that percentage, right? And it's based on 100% being the highest, the maximum value. When we're looking at, let me go into conditional formatting for the color. This one, it's really easy, right? We've got the option to choose a custom value and change it away from the lowest value to a custom value, change it from the highest value to a custom value. But when we're doing that traffic light reporting, it's not readily obvious or available how we do that.
Drop down from percentage will change the numbers.
It will. So if we select this and change it to number, now it's based on the absolute value, right? But that still might not be exactly what we're looking for, but it could be. So now we'll say, okay, let's say anything between 0 and 200 million, we want that to be red. So we can change that to a number. We can put our 200 million in there. Is that what you meant? Somewhat? Right? My brain works a lot more like that rather than in percentages. And so if you want to, you can change all of these to numbers. and you can actually delete that number. And it says max underneath it. Okay. Now, to the point of the person in the back of the room, and let's make this make a little more sense. And we'll put
200 million, like one.
do I need to?
I think yes.
So the question is, I've got 200 million here and I've got 200 million here. Somebody says I should put 200 million one in this box. Who thinks yes?
Logical, yes, but no.
Yeah, so this one says anything greater than 200 million, or sorry, less than, keeping you guys on your toes, making sure you're paying attention. Does that include 200 million? This one says greater than or equal to 200 million. Does that include 200 million? Yes. So I'm only counting 200 million once. I could have them both as equal to. It goes in order. Order matters. All right, so if you do conflicting rules in conditional formatting, the order will override it. Okay, so we can do that, save that, and what I want to show you is if we go back into that conditional formatting, what happened to my max number? It's gone back to the percent, right? So to the person in the back of the room, like you said, 100% is the maximum number in your data, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this has come a long way. You didn't used to be able to delete the number and change it to max number, and it was a lot harder to use. And so I just got fed up with it and used DAX. So I do DAX for all of my conditional formatting needs. I've got a question in the back, and I'm going to continue.
Will the last condition always be an else statement?
Will the last condition always be an else statement? Not necessarily.
Let's change it from max to 100%. Will always change it to 100%.
If I delete that, because I've got no number in there, and I say max number, then yes, that's always an else. It will always change that to 100%. But I could put a number in there. So I could put 500 million in there. And I could save that. What's wrong with it? It's not happy. Please check the logic of this rule.
Enough zeros.
No, because it's less than.
Thank you. Not enough zeros. It's always just like missing a comma or something. So because I've put a number less than my maximum number, now I don't have any green, and the else is just null. Yes.
You talked about using DAX if you wanted to do conditional, like 3 or 4 different tables with the same rule.
Yeah. So I've set this up. My stakeholder loves it, right? Now they know that this traffic light reporting is possible in Power BI, and they come back to me and they say, Allison, that's awesome. Can you do that again? I say, no. So because I've done it here in this visual, I can copy this visual and hope that they want that traffic light reporting on the sales amount still. Or what I could do is I could do that visual again. Let's do it by color. What values do we get for color? And so in the Home tab, we have a format painter. How many of you use this in Power BI? I've not done it for this exact scenario, but it worked. Why did that work?
Because both the
It's a
visuals
place.
are same. If you use a matrix instead, it probably.
Sorted and
It's
sorted.
pretty clever. So if we use a matrix, we are hypothesizing that it's not going to work. So we do that. It wouldn't work on charts because I've done icon set, right? You can't have icon set conditional formatting on a chart. But if I had done background color, it might change the column of a chart. That one I'd have to test, right? So when would I break it? When would it not work?
Data range is not the same as you said.
If the data range isn't the same, I'm going to get lots of blanks like we've got for that one.
A different theme.
Different theme, the color might change slightly. What if they want similar conditional formatting, but this time on the order quantity? Can I use the format painter? No. So that conditional formatting is applied to the sum of sales amount. One of the reasons that I just said this model is awful, I haven't touched it in 5 years. One of the reasons I always use explicit measures, which I'm not doing here, right? So if I had a total sales measure and I needed to change something about that, my conditional formatting is applied to that total sales measure. So if I make any changes to the DAX, the conditional formatting is still attached to that measure, right? So when we're doing that format painting, it's format painting that measure, and that measure doesn't exist in this visual, right? So you need to have the same measure. And did you see what just happened there? I did the format painting before I put the measure in the visual. I know I discovered that accidentally. Right? I was doing something, I deleted the measure out, changed my mind, put the same measure back in. I was like, I'm gonna have to do the formatting all over again. It remembered it. Cool, right? Yeah. Right, so format painter is pretty handy, but DAX will work as well. So who's our DAX fiends in this room? Nobody? One? Yeah. Let's see if we can figure out how to write a DAX measure to do this conditional formatting. So I want to do, we'll call it traffic light. This is a report level measure, and it's a formatting one. So I tend to start with an underscore, and then I'll do a formatting to say that that's formatting. Traffic light. Yes. All right, so we are trying to replicate what we've done where we had the 0 to 200 million. And what was that? What icon did we have for that? Red. Red what?
Oh, 0.
Diamond.
Red diamond. Reza, have you got your blog post memorized? Who knows what the icon in DAX is for a red diamond?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Code for the.
There is a code for it. I can never remember what the code is. So I always need to go Radicad conditional formatting,
Thank you.
icon sets. There we go. Power BI icon names for conditional formatting using DAX. So here they are, you can copy them, but I always go to this table here because I never know which one I want. And so it looks like sign low, sign medium, and possibly sign high if we've got circle high, yeah, because why not? So for our DAX fiends, how are we going to get this into a measure? Switch true is one of my favorite options. How many of you are familiar with the switch function? Oh, so many fun things. Okay, this is in Excel too, the switch function. How many of you are familiar with the if? Excellent. This is exactly the same. So when we do an if, we ask a true or false, yes or no question, right? So all we're doing with the switch is we're using this pattern of switch true to give us the opportunity to ask as many true or false, yes or no questions as we want. Yeah. And this is going to look very similar to that little conditional formatting dialog box that we had open earlier, right? So we are working with the sum of sales amount, and I'm going to be really like dump you guys in the DAX deep end, and I'm going to create a variable for total sales and call that the sum of sales amount.
Let's try to find the.
And so we will ask our first yes or no question, which is the total sales less than 200 million? If it is, sign low is what we said, right? I'm going to do Alt Shift down arrow because I'm really lazy. What's our next condition?
Or 2 or greater than.
Adding the 500 million and all.
So remember, order kind of mattered. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy about the conditional formatting dialog box. It forced you to do the greater than or equal to 200,000, but we already know that it's not going to be less than 200,000 because we've checked for that condition. So the only thing we're left with is that else, anything that's greater than or equal to 200,000. So I don't have to tell Power BI to check for that. I just need to tell it the other side of the bound, which is what?
500 million.
Less than 500,000. And if it's less than 500,000, what sign do I want to give it then? Is it medium or mid? It's medium, eh? And then if it is, could do, greater than or equal to 500,000, then we'll say circle, what was it? Circle high? Does that make sense?
The C.
I did miss a C. Spelling, it's thinking. We'll fix the C when it's thinking. What do we think? How does this compare in difficulty to the little interface? Is it harder?
Could be, but you can.
No, you guys.
So
Yeah. You could copy paste, you could save it. Now that you know the pattern, like it looks quite simple when you know how to do it. Copy paste, save it, great advice, right? Because it makes perfect sense when you lay it out that way. All right. So now what do we need to do with it?
Go to the formatting tab and check.
Go to the formatting tab.
And under the values, I think there's an option to put the function.
Yep. Before I do that, because I'm working on a report level measure, this is one of the downsides to working on report level measures. Whenever you create report level measures, for some reason, they always come in as a data type of a decimal number. We're telling this to return sign low, sign medium, and circle high. Are those decimal numbers? No. So we need to change that to text. Otherwise, our conditional formatting will not work. And then we can create another beautiful visual with the color. And I always right click and do conditional formatting this way when it's in a table or a matrix, because I can never remember where to find it in the formatting tab, but it is in here somewhere. Can I search for it? No, I'm gonna go my way. Conditional formatting, we still want to do icons, but this time instead of using the rules, we're going to use the field value. Base it on, that's why I always use that little FX so that I can just easily search for them all. There's our traffic light. Voila. Cool, right?
Yeah.
Questions?
So the thing with that is when you try and use a slicer,
Yep.
the formatting would probably might not make any sense when you try and use the slicers.
So when you try to use a slicer, you're going to end up with values that are a lot smaller than 200 million. But it's DAX. Anything can be done in DAX, right? So you could still do the 33%, right, using DAX. Get really good with your calculate functions, calculate those percentages of grand totals and totals, and so you can still get that same 33% that the interface has using DAX, if you so desire.
I should make sure that that green circle.
Yeah, we've got different conditions. So we've got 200,000 and 5, we've only got 2 conditions. Whereas if we look at this one, we had the 250,000 as the medium one, and we skipped that in our DAX. So if we want our DAX to be the same, this needs to be 250,000. And then that will make it the same. Other questions? To the point with the slicers, if the DAX and the calculate and the percentages is too hard, use the built-in interface and use the format painter. Right? Not everybody loves DAX as much as I do. I understand. All right.
So when you try and use gradient rather than the traffic light, would that still work? This colors?
If you try and use gradient,
Even if you try and put the slices in, that would still work because it's still marking your highs and lows based on the values.
that the slicer selects, yeah. Correct. Yep.
Necessarily have to use the traffic light.
No, you don't have to use traffic light. You could use the gradient. You could use specific colors. Yeah. So with that specific color formatting, what we'll look at now is actually coloring the color. Do we want to do background color or font color? Background color. All right, so I'm going to base this background color on the color that color says. What color is multi? It doesn't really exist. Neither does NA. I just recently learned that Power BI actually understands over 40 different colors. You just have to know how to write them. Okay. So let me see. I have no idea.
Whatever color you call it in Excel.
So see, there's Rez's article. Color names. These guys. Full disclosure, this list is actually a little bit out of date. You have to go, this is from Chris Webb's blog. You have to go to the actual CSS site to get the current list. But if you write blush in Power BI, it'll understand it as a color. Which is very cool because amaranth is a little bit easier to remember, although not much, than E52, B50, and it's a much nicer red than red. Right? So knowing that you can use lots of other random colors in your conditional formatting is pretty cool. And you would do that the same way that we did this DAX, but instead of writing sign low, you would write a color name. Right? So I can copy this measure and generate a new measure with the same criteria, but just do it for the background color instead of the traffic light. And I can use those colors. So we can say background color, and we can put amaranth in here, yellow in there, and let's see, emerald. And now, because that one is colors, I could apply that even if it is a bar chart. And this is the little FX that we were talking about, right? So again, same thing, field value. What did I forget to do? Why won't it let me select that? Most frustrating thing. Make a text. I forgot to make a text. So I need to cancel out of here. Make that text. Come back in here. And voila. Like I said, this list is out of date. So if we come here, here's the actual list. So we could use Indian red. That should color those red. Questions? Yes.
Can you get a theme color in there instead of a?
Yep. So can you get a theme color in there? So remember we looked at the theme at the beginning. There's these theme colors, but then there's these theme colors. And then there's also some other theme colors that are hidden that you can't edit, that I'm aware of. You can't edit in here, but you can edit under the hood if you know a little bit about JSON. So I've got a theme file here. And when you're doing Power BI themes, we've got lots of different colors that you can define within your theme for the various different elements. And most of them can actually be referenced in your conditional formatting. You just have to know how to write it. So the theme colors have two different names. See if that wants to open. So in your JSON file, you can write either foreground, neutral, secondary, or second level elements. The JSON will accept both. The conditional formatting in DAX will only accept foreground, neutral, secondary. Okay. So here's a Power BI report where I have done what we just did with the product color on this column here and on this column here, and you can see which name it accepts. Excellent question.
So use that method for bringing in my own icons and putting them into the template website where choose your icon from this enormous list and then choose a color for it and it will give you the code things. But in JSON and you have to insert it into your
Excellent. Yeah. So similar to like using the unichar, but a little bit on steroids, right? So going into the JSON theme, defining your own icon. You can name it whatever you want. Can you name the icon whatever you want?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
So you just name the icon, you define it, and then you can reference that just like the sign low, sign medium that we were referencing. Can also apparently use emojis in tables as well, so in DAX. Cool. Anything else conditional formatting related? Yeah.
You do gradient coloring.
In DAX or
Yeah.
not a true gradient. You'd have to define every step of the gradient in DAX. I don't know how to do like a full scaled gradient in any other way except using the built-in interface. Other questions? All right. What are some of our other frustrations when making our reports pretty? Sorry? Maintenance? What do you mean by that?
Also changes or oh, and just with other different grids also.
Yeah, so if the data changes or an update happens and you have to fix it in every single visual. So that's one of the reasons why what we've just done here with this totally not polished report is really awful, because we've done the sum of the sales amount, and if we figure out, oops, actually for some reason we don't want the sum of the sales amount, we need to filter that out and we need to exclude something or do something. Yes, I could do a page level filter, but if it's a little bit more complex than that, now I need to go and replace that in every single one of those visuals, right? So just like using themes early on, if you use explicit DAX measures early on, that'll help with some of that. And that means that if I change the underlying DAX measure, it'll change across all of the visuals. So instead of just using the sales amount implicitly, I should have created a new measure and used that across all the visuals instead. A more common scenario that I encounter, this sales amount has 2 decimal places, and this one I can fix without using the DAX. But the stakeholder says, actually, we want 0 decimal places, or we want it to be accounting instead of currency. So if you go in and you change that, it'll change it across all the visuals. Because I'm using the semantic model that's already saved, I need to go back to that model to change the formatting of that, and that formatting will change across all reports that are using that. So nice consistency across the entire board. So how many of you use the JSON themes? A handful of you. We've had one tip with the icons. Any other tips from? Sorry?
Used it once. I don't know if that means. They use it.
But do all of your reports use it?
They will from now.
Yeah, they will from now, right? So yeah, once you've used it once, it's a good kind of a gateway. So I could share this theme with you guys afterwards. I think you've all registered and we've got your emails or something. Yes. So this theme here, and let me zoom in a little bit, has some coding for what we call visual styles, and this happens across every single visual in the report. So by changing my theme, I get to make a couple of key design decisions once and have that applied to the entire report without having to waste a lot of time changing the radius of the border of the visual, for example, or deciding if I want a border or no border. Or do I want a title centered or left aligned? Do I want my legend on or off by default? And if I want it on, where do I want it? On the bottom, on the left, top right, lower right? Right? So all of these things can be set within your theme file. Right? And this is the generic visual styles for every single visual in the report. And then underneath that, one second, we've got specific for any visual that you want to format. So specifically for the shape or the card visual, do I want the category labels on or off? Do I hate that DIN font and want to change it? All right, question?
Able to make some changes in some specific visual.
Absolutely. So applying this one to an existing report, all that it will do is, so we'll go into themes, browse for themes, and we choose that theme. You can see my big font has gone away now. My colors have, my default colors have changed. My legend and all that placement, my titles, right? So if I go back into here and we say, actually, I want my titles to be center aligned, and we save that, we come back into here. Apply that theme. It'll move the titles for me unless I have changed it specifically. Somewhere else. So you'll see that we've turned off the title for shapes because that doesn't make sense. For the pivot table, we've said show the title, and so now we're overriding the default visual formatting. That's not quite your question, but even within the theme, if I don't, there's not identical things that you want about every visual, right? Because when I said turn on the titles, turned it on for shapes, turned it on for text boxes, it went crazy. Right? So then we had to turn off the titles for the ones we didn't want, right? And overwrite that formatting. Once I've applied the theme, I can still come in here and I can change that manually myself. But now that I've changed that manually on this visual, anything that's manually changed about this visual, when I apply the theme won't impact it. So use themes at the onset because it's a lot harder to make them useful if somebody's already gone in and changed manually every single visual in the report. Applying a theme in that case isn't going to be much help. Yes.
One thing that frustrates me is when you put in a table and then the setting the widths of the columns, and you got to go through. And is there a way to
Wait patiently for a few months?
Okay.
Maybe a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Power BI Core Visuals team is updating the visuals. So you may have noticed that we've got a new card visual and a new slicer. I think you have to turn both of those on in preview. So if you haven't played with the new card visual, do. It's really awesome. The slicer is great if you like button slicers. The matrix has gotten a big facelift in terms of what formatting options it has available. So you can adjust the matrix a fair amount. So we've got a matrix here, and there's now this layout and style presets section here. And it is, we've always had that style bit, but the layout bit is the new part, which makes it almost like Excel pivot tables, right? So we can now change that into outline, tabular, etc., which does not help with your column width equality. But supposedly that's coming soon. There is a little bit of a workaround, and it is quite finicky. And let me see if I can get it to behave for us today. Those are quite big numbers. So we've got this visual. Let's put it on its own page. And that column's not quite the same as that column, which is not quite the same as that one, and it looks really awful and ugly and really messes with my OCD. So usually when it's working, what we can do is we can go into the column headers, and there's this auto resize width option. Have you tried this workaround before?
I've got that far, but then to set them, you still got to estimate.
Yep. So what we do next, and this is the tricky part that works for me like 80% of the time, so fingers crossed and we'll see. We create a column width measure, and it's really sophisticated. You just kind of make it as big as you want it to be. And you apply that to your visual. And this is where, actually, I think this is the 20% of the time that I'm going to get it to work. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new measure for my sales amount. And I am going to put that in here. Inconsistent, different widths, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out that, and I'm going to put in my column width measure instead. That expands out my columns for me. You can go in and tweak your column width measure. Where did I put it? Somewhere really clever. Until you're roughly happy with the width of those columns. Then turn off the auto size width and then update your total sales measure to no longer use the column width and instead use that one. So now they've got, like that little extra space. That one doesn't have space. So yeah, you just need to make sure that it's big enough to hold everything so that it looks pretty when you do it at the end. Yes.
Further to add, I guess the biggest problem that we have is when you have a report that has 15 or 20 columns and you've published everything looks fine. Download you have those columns, you can like of columns and then rest of the columns, just disappears. You've got to work around where you can connect that into PowerPoint Live.
Yep.
Now you can have all those 20 columns. The challenge is getting that PDF. Is there any, is the Microsoft working on it? Your team?
Getting all the columns to load into the PDF. There's paginated reports that's designed for that. So the question is, we've got more columns than fit on the page and you have to scroll to be able to see all the columns. When we export that to the PDF, then we just get a really ugly scroll bar and we're missing half of the data story. How do we get around that, right? So the workaround they're using currently is exporting to PowerPoint Live because it's live. The scroll bar works in PowerPoint. In a PDF, it does not work. So the only workaround that I have, the easy one, well, neither of them are easy. Paginated reports is a totally new learning curve, but that's what I would call the easy one because that's what it's designed to do, is to paginate your PDF into your table into different pages so that if it's got 15 columns and only 8 fit on a page, then it'll take 2 pages to give you all of those columns, kind of like what you do with page breaks in Excel, right? Paginated reports is not really that easy to use, unfortunately. So I have done in the past for some clients a lot of DAX, which was not terribly efficient, but when it's a PDF, it doesn't matter. That does that pagination for you. So that was my workaround. Does anybody else have any clever insights on that? Export to Excel, yeah, that's another option.
The formatting kind of disappears when you have the file.
Well, you could analyze in Excel, so you could actually build the report in Excel because Excel has the pagination, right? So just like how I connected this model to the published Power BI dataset, you can do that same thing in Excel, right? So I'm signed in to Excel under a different account. So I won't demo the fullness of it, but if you go data, get data from Power Platform, from Power BI, you can pull through that Power BI data set, and then you could just create the pivot table in Excel. You could do pivot charts in Excel. You could still get a fairly reasonable looking dashboard. It's not going to be as polished as a Power BI dashboard. It's Excel visuals, but it gives you that pagination.
I had the same problem with a chart.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like for a chart, it should be able to squish. You should have the option to make it fit to one page, you know, because obviously it's not the same as numbers that have got that width, you know.
So the workaround that I've done for the chart is kind of similar to what we did here, which is basically mess with your page size. So if you've got a chart, and what have I got that's really big? I think customers, probably a lot of customers. So if we do first name of customer, and we do the total sales. There's a lot of customers. That's a pretty long chart, right? This is probably longer than one that I would want to fit on a page. And you know, yours is probably more trend worthy in months.
A line, you know, so it doesn't have anything like you have to really read.
Let's go with month. Month. So this is going to give me both my answers in one go. So because month, number of year is a numeric value, when we are looking at the x-axis, we've got 2 options. We can set that as continuous, which means squish me and fit me. You can do that with new numbers. You can do that with dates. You can't do it with text. So if you really don't need to read it, use something.
Yeah, I had to change it from the date because otherwise it was just wanted to give me like once a year or something, you know, like hardly any dates.
It wasn't enough. Yeah, I just had that conversation with somebody yesterday, actually. So when we switch it to categorical, it then forces it to give every single value. And if your chart is too small, you get a scroll bar, all right? So if my page was only this big, that's as big as I'd be able to make the chart. But what you can do as a workaround, and it is definitely a workaround, is you can go into the canvas settings and change that to custom page size. You can make your page bigger, make your visual bigger, mess around with the font size a little bit on the chart until it looks kind of how you want it to look, and voila.
Because it's not by much.
It's not by much.
I only got a shrink of it.
And I've done that a handful of times. So that one I've used fairly more frequently than my other workarounds. So yeah. Anybody else have any other ideas on that? Okay. Question?
I would just categorize them like in a group and by drill through so they can go down.
Yeah. So, but the challenge is if you want to see the delineation by month, but you only want the label quarterly, I don't know how to do that, for example.
Drill down.
Drill down could work. So here we've got the month number and you've got, let me put year. Not a bad idea. So if you had like quarter and then used the month initial instead of the month, you'd still get a bar for every month, but then your label would be quarterly, and you could format your quarter label to say whatever you want it to say. So it could say January 1st, 2024, or it could say quarter one, or it could say Q1, right? So that is another good option as well. Yes.
Weekly data, then monthly, then quarterly, and then yearly.
Yep.
So what I did is I create a parameter, hierarchical parameter, and using the parameter and put it in the Excel. That will not solve the problem, but it's a better look than.
Yeah, the parameter is really good for it, not for if you're PDFing it, but if you're wanting it to dynamically change from year down to month automatically for you, the parameters are really good. Owen just taught me how to do that a few weeks ago at Analytics Friday, and we've now implemented it at North Power. It's in all of our certified data models. We've taken it a step further so that it still has the whole hierarchy. It's very cool.
I guess the other workaround is, just create a filter, for say calendar year, maybe last year, this year, just at the top. And then at least we'll have a 12 months and another 12 months down. So at least, when you PDF, at least you'll have that.
Splitting it into two. Yeah. Paginating it. Yeah.
Having a some
few ideas for you. How are we doing for time? Good. All right. What other questions or frustrations are we wanting to? How are we feeling? Good.
Will you ask one more question?
Yes.
This is around the map visual.
Yeah, I'll try.
I've been trying really hard to get, a good map visual where I can put all the customer data in, see where our customers are based. So data, but I'm struggling to get a really good map visual that could do a nice visual. Is there anything that you recommend? There's one that I found, but would have to agree to their terms and condition, which is
no deal.
Yeah.
So mapping in Power BI is really challenging. The built-in map visuals work off of Bing Maps. How many of you use Bing in your daily life? Yeah, I think there's you still okay. I think there's a reason for that. So it's not the easiest mapping tool to get locations in the right spot, and it doesn't look super flash. The visual that I use for maps, because is it New Zealand?
Yep.
No, it was.
No, but your one is New Zealand. Do you want regional like heat map stuff, or do you
I
want?
currently use ArcGIS.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of gives us the regional.
ArcGIS is the best one. I think it's also comes with a fee associated with it as well.
And you've got to agree to the terms, conditions, and it's not related with Microsoft as such. So
No, it's
data is.
that's the other challenge with mapping. So anytime you are mapping data, you have to kind of usually send the data outside to get it geolocated. And so most of the map visuals will not meet the Microsoft certification terms for custom visuals for that reason. It doesn't mean they're not safe. It just means that you're having to send that data somewhere to geolocate it. Depending on how they do that, you might be able to find some that don't require it. If you're not worried about the specific location and you just want to do kind of like an SVG, like a heat map, and I've got a sample here that I can show you. The synoptic panel is my favorite map visual, and it's not actually a map visual. So if we look at your visuals in here, synoptic panel, it does have the certification tick, which means that you can publish it to PDF and it doesn't have the big question marks. So that's really cool. And that visual works off of SVG files. And I seem to have maybe lost good internet connection. But that one, I've got a New Zealand regional map that's broken down by the different DHBs. And so you can color each region of New Zealand and do like gradients. It lets you do different states. It's quite a cool visual. I've used that one for health and safety reporting because you can do like a body. You can put your own SVG files into there, so you could have your factory floor, or you could do Auckland, and like with North Power, we've got different power zones that we look after, so we can draw out exactly where each zone is and map that and have that specific to us. So if it's like regions, that's a really good one. But if you're wanting specific locations, ArcGIS is.
You do it in the Google Maps using the KML file. That's what I've used previously.
Talk afterwards. Yeah.
It's tricky because you have to define every.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. Once you get the region set up, then you're away.
Recently got Azure Maps. Will it be any better?
I haven't used them. Yeah. There's I've enabled them and turned them on, but I don't do enough mapping to know if they're much better. I haven't tested all of my pain points. Like Georgia is a country and not a state in the US, and everything seems to want to go to the UK and Canada because our New Zealand place names are just horrendous. I do have a mapping project coming up, but yeah, I didn't find the Azure Maps to be super more successful at finding things in New Zealand, but
It's a measure the regions and the
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so when you're doing mapping, and you'll see that I've geolocated this as country, that will get Georgia in the right place rather than it being a state. So that's the first challenge. You need to provide it the New Zealand of the country, the region of Auckland, the city of Auckland again if we're here, and then the address. But even sometimes that still puts it in Canada for me. So
shape visual, and we have a shape file for each regional councils and territorial authority of New Zealand on the StatsNZ website. So we can download that in GeoJSON and then load into shape file.
yeah, I think the shape visual is slightly newish as in like the last 3 to 5 years. The synoptic panel was around before that, but they're very similar. So yeah, either one of those is really good for regional things. So yeah, there's stuff out there. Yeah. What else? Nothing? Okay. The only other thing I didn't cover off is, in addition to themes, use a template. It'll save you a lot of time. So think ahead about where you want your stuff to go. Do you want your slicers on the right-hand side? Do you want them on the left-hand side? Have that all set up and just have, you know, she's like, I've used themes once and now all of my reports are going to use that theme. Have a template that does the same thing. And then it just takes a lot of the thinking out of it. Oh, and I heard somebody say if it's the same visual, and this is not the case anymore. Where's our beautiful file gone that we've got all our stuff in? So we've got quite a few different visual types in here. And I can actually select all of these at the same time and format them. And so I can set the height of all of these to be the same and the width of all of these to be the same. And then I can go align and distribute.